Do you think today that art is something useful and it could be?
It has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be, and if it's not useful, we can go to hell.
Because one might compare this. You're right.
Because we are only our only importance, if we can talk about importance in this
context,
yes, is that we are in contact with other human beings.
Passion of Anna, for me, is perhaps the most successful, if not the most brilliant. That would be Persona, maybe. But the most successful postmodern. It's a postmodern in a more relaxed mode, in a more open mode, a less forcing you by its own brilliance, a less aggressive tone.
Passion of Anna is very courageous in telling the story of a man who is almost numb in his possibilities to talk, and the woman who is grabbing to get everything out of him. It's a portrait of masculinity and femininity that I think is very rare.
The Passion of Anna in Sweden was never called The Passion of Anna, it was called The Passion, which somehow is a very different title because it doesn't only put your finger on Anna, it talks about the lack of passion or the passion of all the people involved, not only the four main characters, but the other sub-characters there as well. And I think maybe to see the movie, if you have that title clear in your mind, the passion, and how bad you can go if your passion is destructive, I think that will give you a better understanding of the whole movie.
I had become so conditioned by the grimness of this period, starting with Persona and the disintegration of film. Here we are still, as I see it, very much centered on the disintegration of Max von Sydow, as he disintegrates in Shame, as he disintegrates in The Hour of the Wolf. As a matter of fact, at the end of the film, in Passion of Anna, can you imagine? You want to see a guy disintegrate? Okay. This is the ultimate disintegration.
It was a very unhappy film. Ingmar and I decided we were more or less breaking up. And there was a lot of circumstances on that film that made it a very tough film to do.
If you always have the feeling that somebody is there and somebody enormously loves you, but you can't see it, because the whole world around you is full of terrifying things, but still this God or Christ is marvelous, and you are a dirty snake. It is not good for your feeling. But if you feel you have to do as good as possible under these circumstances, and this love and this good doesn't exist, everything, you can explain everything, you understand everything. And that is not to fear, that is some sort of not existence. I think that's marvelous.
Ja, men varför driver du med det då? Varför driver du med det? Varför bygger du ett kulturhus som du inte tror på? Varför sysslar du inte med någonting som du verkligen tror på, som är sant inom dig själv?
He was in conflict. He was so much in conflict that he wasn't always sure of what he really wanted to express in that movie. So he improvised, which he had never done that way before. That the four leading characters in the movie, Max von Sydow, Bibi Andersson, Erland Josephson, and I, we would sit at a table and we would be who we were as normal people. And each would have their time, a close-up of saying what they thought about their character, or what they thought about God, or whatever. And the one who was to speak would get some glasses of wine so they would feel really free. And because I was so angry at the movie, because he was always showing this woman I was playing as somebody who was lying and didn't believe in the truth, when it was my turn, I wanted to tell him how important truth was, and that I even believed that the character I was playing was trying to tell the truth, and what truth means in life or whatever. And then it came to my turn, and I drank my glasses of red wine, and I talked about truth, and that I believe that people should be truthful to each other. And because Ingmar was so angry at me and angry at my vision of truth and whatever, and that's what my character was all about too, lying and truthful and whatever, he just cut what I was saying as a personal leave, cut it. So what I said in the movie as me too became a lie, and I've never forgiven him for that, because all the three others, they got to say their whole, what they had thought of, they wanted to say the whole thing. I was the only one who was brutally cut.
Nej, jag trodde att Gud hade skägg när jag var liten för att...
What I remember as improvisation was the dinner table, where we all go around and tell each other whatever we want and picking up lines from each other. That's the only thing I remember as a total improvisation. If you know that they can choose and cut and take whatever, it's great fun. You just go ahead and you have a character, and you, of course, I would like to improvise in my character. It's no fun to just go n'importe quoi, as we say in France. But I was thinking of who I was in this film. And out of that, I was telling stories.
And it was funny, and we were talking and improvising, and we found it very funny. But I think it's very difficult to mix improvisation with very careful written lines. It is two different languages, artistically and also filmatic, which makes I think that part in the Passion of Anna is a little bit, it's foreign.
Ja, jag träffade en av poliserna igår på färjan. De har inte något spår, men folket här, de misstänker Johan Andersson ute på skir.
When you make films, it's different from the theater. You have to, in every second with the camera, you have to be alive, look spontaneous, and to be spontaneous also. Some actors have an extraordinary gift to be spontaneous in the last few seconds of a shot, so it comes something new. Directors like Ingmar, they are hunting these moments.
You know, it's very difficult to make films. It's very many things are so irrational. Yeah. And so difficult, and so we work in such a tension, and you never know exactly what you get. And if you have some friends around you, you know, it's not only the actors who are the same, it's the same electricians, the same cameraman,
same crew, yes.
It's always the same crew. And that is, we always come together and make our films together, and I think it's a nice way of working, because we know each other and we are not shy.
Max, hur ser du som skådespelare rent personligt på den här Andreas Winkelmann?
Jag tycker han är väldigt besvärlig på ett sätt, därför han har ju så länge försökt gömma sig för sin omgivning.
One of the kind of revealing things about this movie, coming from the people in question, the actors, it's that a certain sort of freedom in their telling us about how they related to the improvising that Bergman was forcing upon them, when each one has his or her bit to relate to the character and explain to the audience.
För mig är Eva en kvinna som jag tror till slut inte längre orkar med medvetenheten om sin egen sammanhangslöshet.
He said, I'm not sure about that at all. I would like to test it. I would like to be able to go out and in of reality and fiction. I don't know if it's good. He was the last I heard him talk about it, I wasn't sure it was going to be in. And then it was in. He's entitled to his experiments.
Jag tror att Elis Vergeros tycker att det är hyckleri att förfasas över människornas dårskap, att det är slarv med känslor och ropa efter anständighet och rättvisa.
Yeah, it was different. They described their own parts, their own destiny, and that was also a sort of double messages in acting. I think it's now if I should see the film, I should take it out. I don't know.
Jo, jag sympatiserar väldigt med Annas sanningsbehov och förstår väldigt gott att hon önskar att världen ska se ut på ett visst sätt.
He himself was confused about what he was going to do, because this was an idea he got in the middle of the whole movie, that we would do this. It was never in the script at all. As a matter of fact, Ingmar Bergman never really improvises. He's very meticulous that every word should be letter perfect. But he made that because I think he was slightly worried. Where are we going?
Always romantic.
Jag tar den är fin. Det är en av mina äldsta skivor, tror jag. Nej, därför att jag har en sån väldigt sällskräck, nämligen. Har jag alltid haft.
Mm.
Men det är synd, därför att faktiskt redan när jag gick i skolan så drömde jag om att få gå ner i en av de där djupa franska grottorna.
The film's going along at that level, but at the same time you're seeing each one's terrible, tragic story and so on and so forth, and Bibi suffering, and you could go on. The marvelous scenes she has, for example, to a piece of romantic swing that takes us years back, a lovely thing when she is, in her helplessness, all but seducing Max von Sydow and so on.
Well, to me it was very normal. I didn't think that my character thought about being seductive. I think she thought about how will I get through the night, because I have problems to sleep and I'm very... she was comfortable, and when suddenly she feels she could sleep, she asks him can I go to bed? Because that's her... I think she is in a deep depression, really. And it never occurred to me that she did it to seduce him. But then, being a woman, being so feminine, she cannot help being a little bit seductive, because that's her nature. So that's what I thought when we did it.
Och det är svårt när man en dag inser att man är alldeles meningslös.
I wasn't aware that my character is also so super feminine. I mean, she just needs somebody to lean on, and she is not a strong woman. And when I think about it was a compliment that he gave me that role, I must say. I saw it completely different, and I can agree now that it's a very good film, which I wasn't sure of then.
This is the most, I find, deconstructive film. This is the ultimate disintegration. At the end of the film, what does Bergman do? His camera is far back. It's a long shot already. Bergman zooms. He doesn't dolly in. He just zooms in slowly, slowly. But it barely moves. It just moves through a zoom. And you get closer and closer. And what happens? The image begins to lose its shapes and forms. That's what happens when you go in with a zoom. The colors begin to all meld together. And there's the character of Max von Sydow walking up and down, and he's beginning to disintegrate in front of our eyes. And you just see this sort of figure that is decomposing. And sure enough, in this movie, I was describing the ultimate disintegration. And it's as if Bergman is saying, his voice at the end, and this time his name was still the same modern man, impotent, unable to do anything. You know, ultimately, the artist disintegrating. Me, disintegrating.
Everybody has a sort of holiness in himself. And why, we don't know why, but everybody has. We have no God outside. We have some sort of God inside. We don't know how it works, how it's created. But I think it's generations and generations of hope and despair and prayers and as I said. And what church of today has to do is to tell people about this holiness, about this, and educate them to listen to that holiness and to educate everybody to come in intuitive contact with this part of the soul.
Ingmar is a great director of his own life, and maybe that's where he's done his best direction. His life is not been directed completely by God, it's been directed by Ingmar Bergman himself. And I think very, very few people today are allowed to do that. But he still is allowed to do that because he is such a good director of his own life.
Do you think today that art is something useful and it could be?
It has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be. And if it's not useful, we can go to hell.
Because one might compare this.
Because we are only our only importance, if we can talk about importance in this
context,
yes, is that we are in contact with other human beings. They ask us to give them something. People ask us to give them something, and we have to give them. If we don't, we can go to hell, all of us. You know, at first you are very optimistic, you are a builder in a cathedral, then you are very pessimistic, you are inside a snake, and then you just are alive, and you do your work, and that is marvelous. And as long as you are allowed, permitted to do your work and to go to do your work, I think it's marvelous.
And
to get paid for it.
Mellanspel, Liv Ullmann, 7.
We used to joke about this dog. It's a lovely dog. I had this dog in my first marriage. It is a Dachshund called Pet. And when Ingmar came into my life, Pet hated Ingmar, and Ingmar hated Pet. And Pet, each time Ingmar came to visit me in Norway, would try and bite his leg. And Ingmar, when I wasn't looking, tried to kick Pet. And one day Ingmar told me, and it was in the midst of the winter, they went out walking because Ingmar's idea was they would walk far away from the house where I was living, and then Ingmar would just let go of Pet and run home. But Pet kind of knew this, Ingmar says, and Pet would start looking at him, and Ingmar didn't dare because of the eyes of Pet. But then when we went to this house that Ingmar had built for us on Fårö, I said, I'm bringing Pet, I want something. And Ingmar said, no, you can't bring Pet. I said, Pet is coming. And so Pet came, and Pet was only allowed to be out in the kitchen entrance. But this dog was so sly. This dog knew that if this dog was to have a good life, if Pet was to have a good life, he had to make friends with Ingmar and not with me. So Pet, this long Dachshund, crawled himself from the kitchen entrance and into the beginning of the living room. And there, each time Ingmar passed him, the dog would just look admiring at Ingmar. And so it will crawl closer and closer to Ingmar's chair in the living room. And each time Ingmar said something, the dog would almost, be like this. If I said something, the dog didn't even look. And finally, the dog had sneaked itself into Ingmar's workroom. And when that door was closed for me, I was not allowed to come there during the day. Pet was there, and Pet was not on the floor. Pet was lying on Ingmar's table. And while Ingmar wrote his script, Pet was lying on the table and just looking at Ingmar. And we used to joke that Pet, who was a very ambitious dog, was calling Hollywood saying, I'm writing these stories, and Ingmar Bergman is saying he's writing them, but I am really writing them. And so when I left Fårö, after 5 years or whatever, 4 years, I don't even remember the years, my child and I, who do you think stayed at Fårö? And when my child and I went into the car and we were leaving, who was standing at Ingmar's legs? Pet. And Pet was trying not to look at me because somehow Pet was a little ashamed. So Pet was looking at some flies on the ground, and we left. And the last thing I saw was Ingmar and Pet, their backs turned to the car, going into the house. So they had a happy ending.
When some movie makers hired me, I didn't know they hired Bergman. They thought they could borrow some of the prestige from him. And it's not possible, not through me. I can only work with what I have and with them. And it doesn't dress them up because I worked with Bergman. He represents to me a person who has devoted his full entire life to his craft. And he has lived a little bit on the side, but not very much. He has some children, 6 I think, so he was awake at night. But really, he is so interested in art, and this art particularly. How to make people come alive, how to get us to know what is behind. So I love him for that, because he's like a Picasso, but in his own field, you know. And you call that talent, I call it also disciplined worker. He never stops using his craft and work. I think he sits alone on the island with plays, thinking how movements should look, you know, just for pleasure. And he sees films every night. He watches TV every night. This is what he takes his nourishment from. I have had dinners with him, but he tells bad stories. He's not the best dinner guest, and he doesn't like the food normally. So he's fantastic when he does what he's good at. And if you have the great honor to be around him while he does it, you really get something. I'll tell you something, those films came in a period. I'm very happy for having been part of it, even in films that were made outside Bergman. That was very rare, and it is today very rare, that you could afford to be really a cinema auteur and do your own your films. And to be an actor at that time in films was a great pleasure. Today I have made 2 films recently, and it was okay. But they have the last film, they had so little money so that they couldn't even make a retake if something was not good, you know. And also, today they're very young, they're new, they come right out of film school. I'm this old hat, I want them all to be Bergman, and they're not. And I'm not going to beat them for that. But I don't enjoy it so much as I did then. But I still like to work, and I still work the same way, but not desperately. I'm not desperate to work. I'm so fine down here.
Nej, det var bra att jag var tvungen att sätta mig upp och säga fram hela tiden. Då fick gå iväg.
Nu var det regnet.
Det är förskräckligt.
Hur ska du komma hem ikväll?
Ja, jag har min regn.
Du får sova här. Då kan du sova. Vi har ett stort fint gästrum. Nu dricker vi kaffe.
Yeah, he's my closest friend. It's nice to talk together. We speak a lot by telephone. And then it is important to have things in common, especially work, to work together. And to work together with such a talented person is very nice and very interesting, and it's very, you develop yourself very much by that. But nowadays, when we are old, we have it's important for us to talk about life, about death, about destiny, about hope, about sorrow. We talk every Saturday now. And that's a good habit. And we always try, sometimes it can be impossible, but because we are working in different places or something like that, shooting or something. But we try to make it every Saturday. Of course, when we are shooting together and working together in theater, we don't do. We meet daily then, so not need it. But it is if you speak every week, you can go directly. You don't say how is the weather and all this pingling, because you have to get in contact to open the canals between you and so on. It's hello, and then it's sometimes gossip and sometimes joke. It's sometimes very serious.